when Gleaves was talking about Henry Adams and how we influence posterity, influence history, I was reminded of Benjamin Franklin's contribution on the same topic, how we influence history. And he put it, he said, if you would not be forgotten as soon as you are dead and rotten, either write things worth the reading or do things worth the writing. Now, those of us who choose history as a craft, for the most part, we don't get to do the things that are worth the writing. So we have to try to write the things that are worth the reading. I'm delighted to be here at Grand Valley and at the Ford Museum, in part because it's a great place to be, and the audiences that I've had before have been knowledgeable and warm and generous and just great people to talk to. But I was particularly intrigued when Gleaves suggested that I would give not just one lecture, but a series of lectures, because it gave me an opportunity to try out some ideas that I've had regarding the presidency. I didn't begin as a historian of the American presidency. I actually began as a historian of American foreign policy. But naturally, that had me observing presidents. And I gradually got into the business of biography. So I wrote a biography of Theodore Roosevelt and one of Benjamin Franklin. And lately I've written on a couple of presidents, in part because I want this series of biographies, this collection of biographies that I'm writing, to add up to a history of the United States. And you can tell the history of the United States through a history of the presidency. You can do it other ways as well, but the presidency is an engaging way of doing it because the presidency has become preeminently the expression of American political will and political culture. If you want to know how American democracy works, yeah, you need to study Congress. You probably ought to pay attention to the Supreme Court and the courts generally. But the place to start, the place where you can get most bang for your historical buck, is to examine the presidency. And changing attitudes regarding the presidency, changing expectations, changing performance on the part of presidents, tell you a whole lot about how American society works, how American politics works, how even the American economy works, and American foreign policy works at any given stage of American sort of historical development and life. So I've been thinking about presidents for a while, and I've developed certain notions as to what is involved in being a successful president. I was about to say being a good president, but in fact, that's one of the things I'm going to talk about tonight. What makes a good president? What makes a good person? What makes a successful president? What makes a great president? And one of the points that I'm going to make, sort of the reason that this lecture is called, what's it called? The subtitle is Why Nice People Make Lousy Presidents, and the title is, Loyal to a Fault. Yes. And this is something that distinguishes, well, in some cases, the best presidents from the ones who aren't so good. So, I'm going to be talking about, if you needed a nutshell of what the theme tonight is, it's how codes of conduct and ethics for presidents, and I would say for national leaders generally, or leaders of great powers, often differ and must differ from codes of conduct for individuals. And I'm going to talk about how this is played out in history, and I'll have some comments about how this connects to current politics. The debate we're having today over who the next president of the United States should be. How we choose presidents. But I'm going to begin with a story of one president and a friend of his, and one president and a bitter enemy of his. The president in both cases was Andrew Jackson. And first I will tell you about Andrew Jackson and his friend. Andrew Jackson was a president who inspired strong passions in people. He was an individual, not just a president, who inspired strong passions in people. Andrew Jackson has the dubious, I guess, distinction of being the only president to have killed a man in cold blood. Andrew Jackson killed Charles Dickinson in a duel in 1806. The duel, it wasn't the only duel Andrew Jackson ever fought. It wasn't the only duel in which gunfire was exchanged, but it is the only one in which Jackson's opponent died. And Jackson was extremely cold-blooded about this. The man had insulted Andrew Jackson's wife. And Andrew Jackson was not one to let insults of Rachel, his beloved wife, go unchallenged and unpunished. And I told this story to a class of 7th graders. I often get asked to lecture to classes. I live in Austin, and so I know people in the public schools, some of the teachers, and they'll ask me to come around and talk to their classes, and I will. And the most challenging class that I had to talk to was a 7th grade class. And I really wasn't excited about the idea because I have had 7th graders, so I have children. And at the moment I had, in fact, a 7th grader. And I know that maintaining the attention of 7th graders is not easy, which is why I've taught professionally all levels from 9th grade through PhD students. And I take my hat off to anybody who teaches high school students, and even more so to anybody who teaches junior high school students. I never had the nerve to do that full time. It's got to be the hardest job on earth. So I agreed to talk to this class. And I was talking to them about history, and I was supposed to make some points, and I didn't know exactly what points I was supposed to make, and I didn't know exactly what they knew, and it was the last period of the day. They had to be there. Their thoughts were elsewhere, either football practice or the girl sitting over in the next row, or you know what goes through the heads of 7th graders. But in Texas, 7th grade is when kids learn Texas history. And it's something that Texas schools and Texas teachers and Texas pupils are very proud of. They learn their Texas history. So I wasn't asked to talk about Texas history. I was asked to talk about national history, something about the 19th century. And so I'd talk about this, the emergence of democracy, and I would talk about, well, I'd recently published a book on Andrew Jackson. So I talked about Andrew Jackson, his connection to Sam Houston. Okay, there's a Texas connection there. And Jackson's role in the annexation of Texas. Yeah, there's a Texas role there. And I was losing them. And so then I just mentioned offhand that Andrew Jackson had killed a man in a duel. Oh boy, especially the guys in the class. Oh yeah, really? Tell me more about this. So this is one of those cases. Any teacher has experienced this, and pretty much any public speaker. When you realize that something you've said has made a connection, then it just kind of draws you in that direction. And so, I got their attention with dueling. So then I explained, and this is actually, it's a little bit of it's in the book, but I explained that in the mid-19th century, so the early 19th century, excuse me, there were 2 theories of dueling as to how you could do it. Now, I really would digress too much to go into those in detail, but the students loved it. And anyway, so they wanted to know more about dueling. And I don't know if they remembered anything else, but they did remember that under Tennessee and Southwestern protocol in those days, a misfire was different from a miscock. A misfire, if your gun misfires in a duel, you don't get a do-over. Like, I don't know, maybe they're going to do in Michigan here. But a miscock, which means that the hammer wasn't pulled all the way back, then you do get a do-over. So, I don't know, maybe the debate over the primary will come down to whether it was a misfire or a miscock.